So today we're covering the top 10 loadouts after the season 4 update that basically changed a bunch of different weapons. Normally we like to start with an experimental class. I don't really have a lot of experimental ones right now because I've been trying a lot of different builds right now. But in general, this is like a class where I would be trying something new, get a comment saying, hey, you should check out this build. People are sleeping on it. I try on it and decide, hey, you know what? That is actually better than I thought. Or you know what? It's still kind of garbage. On top of that, there's only a finite number of class setups here, or else I could just do top 50 loadouts and include all these weapons that will probably be commented in the comments section. And just a side note, before we get into the perks and stuff like that, we do have a sponsor segment, which we'll do right now. Today's video is brought to you by Mana, rewards debit card and checking account for gamers. Mana rewards you for your gaming and entertainment purchases while also allowing you to earn points by playing video games that you're able to connect your gamer tag through the app. Mana also gives you points for all purchases that could be used on gear, video games, or even gift cards. They even offer Mana Pro, which comes with a ton of different benefits, including Discord Nitro for a year, different gift cards, and more. So if you're interested, you can sign up for the waitlist and refer friends. Thank you to Mana for sponsoring today's video. Welcome back. Before the STG nerf, I ended up having the STG with fully loaded, and that's what we're looking at here with these builds, and I'll cover these pretty quickly. And it's modified because we have to have fully loaded in there. It's kind of like a regain class. Use the amp to get a kill, and then you swap that out for whatever gun people have. So the build for the amp is going to be the Agency's Suppressor Task Force Ember Sighting Point, 50 round fast or 30 round fast, and the Serpent Wrap. And then we have the NZ41, which is kind of dominant right now, but it's going to get nerfed into the ground. Not only nerfed, but nerfed into the ground. Usually when they keep it this long, it's kind of a problem, right? Got MX Silencer, the Orb Weaver 360. We've swapped from the burst because we don't no longer need the burst, because they fixed the bullet velocity on this one. So now you get solid bullet velocity, and that's what kind of like was a huge buff to the weapon, even though it didn't really need a buff. And then we're using the 2.5 or the 3 to 6. Generally on Caldera, you're always going to go 3 to 6 because the level of zoom you get with the 6 is so beneficial that even though it wobbles a little bit or gives that visual kick, regardless of your FOV, that is generally the way to go. Otherwise, you just can't see stuff, right? And then we got the Orb Weaver E-Pack. People argue on this. This is what I use. This is what I prefer. If you don't like that, that's okay. Use whatever the heck you want, right? We're using Brace for that initial recoil, the fully loaded with Hatch Grip. This has kind of been like the go-to now. Like a lot of the attachments kind of swapping away from polymer. And there's the other tight grip that is kind of phased out because they've intentionally changed them to the point where Hatch Grip will generally be better depending on the recoil pattern. And then we got Strife Angled with the 50 round and the lengthened. Some people like EOD because the explosive abuse. Serpentine, even though you do get an extra shot to kill, to be shot at, that is sometimes enough for you to get around to cover, plate up, and then reset up a gunfight instead of just getting killed out in the open. Even though it is generally one bullet, it can feel more annoying at times depending on how you go that route. These ones are like the regain ones, so that's like tempered, restock, hardline, whatever you want to use. Obviously, those are a lot of floor perks now that should be introduced hopefully this week to Fortune Keep, and then still on Rebirth Island, as we'll have 3 maps to choose from. The Bruin is pretty much the best long-range option for any MW gun besides a sniper like the HDR or whatever, the Kar 98, if you keep it a little bit closer at range. So this one's going to be monolithic, Summit, 26.8, tac laser, 3x optic, and then we also have 60 round mag. You could get rid of the tac laser for the commando, but you are getting the benefit with the aim down sight, and this does allow it to be pretty good. You just don't, you get that visual zoom that the Vanguard ones kind of have that toggle between. We're using the CX9, which I'm not really a big fan of. I think it's slow, sluggish. There's other builds that people said, hey, try this. Either way, it feels like you're in mud. No matter what you do with this build, feels dirt compared to a Vanguard weapon, and that's by design, right? Otherwise, people would still be using the CX9 other than the Siny Infinitesimal. But if you want to use those guns because you like the way they look or sound, that is your build. The CX38S, the CXFR, sleight of hand, tac laser, 50 round drum. If you don't feel like you need sleight of hand, you could put on under barrel or optic or the tac laser, whatever you want, right? Vargo is probably one of the few guns, along with the XM4, that does compete out of the Vanguard weapons, or compete with the Vanguard weapons in terms of TTK, versatility, bullet velocity, damage per mag, all that stuff. And I think if you haven't unlocked it yet, XM4 is probably the best option. AK-47 feels like a weak version of what it was before. Still pretty good if you're really just a fan of a harder hitting gun, even though it doesn't hit like incredibly hard anymore. I think it's still solid too, but pretty much run the same build on all of those Cold War guns. Grew suppressor, last barrel, Spetsnaz grip or field agent grip or whatever. And then we got 60 round with the 3x optic. And that's kind of how that one works. OTS is still pretty good. Damage per mag isn't great because it only has the 40 bullets. Bruiser Suppressor Task Force, Serpent, so you get a little bit faster aim down sight. If you want movement, you can go with the Bruiser instead of that, or the Tiger Team Spotlight, which is always a good option, along with the skeletal stock if you don't care about the aim down sight or you don't care about the reload. And that's going to bring us into the top list of weapons. And keep in mind that for the vast majority of these, besides the meta chasers, you can go ahead and swap the long range option with the short range option, the short range option with the long range option. So you have that versatility on however you want to build them. I just try to get as many classes in here because at the end of the day, most people are only using 2 or 3 total options at all. One long range option and 1 to 2 close range. It's kind of boring to be like a 10-second video saying this or that and that's it. But if you want a little bit of variety, because I find the NC meta horrendously boring. Like I almost don't even want to, like I have like very little playtime using the NZ just because it's so damn boring to delete people that easily with no skill, no effort. But some people need that, right? So it is what it is. I'll give you other options. So we have these builds. Like I said, they're not in any particular order. The M40 or the KG M40 got a huge buff, which makes it a little bit more viable. It always had kind of really low recoil, which isn't really a big issue. You can use the 40 round or the 60. It just kind of depends on preference. I think most people find the 60 round just gets the job done. But 40 is probably better in like solos, duos, maybe even trios. But there's always going to be something that's holding a weapon back. And I think generally that's good for balance. But sometimes it's like, well, this gun is pretty much, it would be meta, but it's an LMG, so it's slow or whatever, right? So we have that, and this one is a pretty solid MX. This Reisdorf Shrouded, the 3 to 6X, unless you're on Rebirth or the Fortune's Keep, the 2X is probably fine, 2.5X. And then we got the padded brace, on hand, hatch grip. Like I said, a lot of those are converting to that. Hand stop. And then we got the Klauser 60 round drum with the lengthen, or you can go with the 40 round because that one has a little faster fire rate, less recoil, but the problem is the bullet velocity. So you better just to keep the standard one, hit your shots, and you're going to have better bullet velocity. For the secondary, we're using the Sten. It got a pretty big buff. This is the one I'll admit I don't have as much playtime on, really to get it fine-tuned to find out what is the most optimal build and where it fits in the meta. I just know it's good enough now to compete, especially after all the movement changes. We got recoil booster, the rapid barrel, the slate reflector, the Gawain custom with acrobatic quick, and now most of the SMGs are kind of taped and skeletal just because of the movement buffs that they have there. It just kind of put leaps ahead, even though it's not as cracked out and broken as it was during that like 3 or 4 days where taped was just overdone. And there's a 50 round drum, which kind of puts it edges out a little bit in the type 100 in that category because you just get extra bullets to down players. If you want the extra bullet velocity, you can go lengthen, or you can go subsonic, which will keep you off the mini map. That gets us the next one, which is the Cooper, another one that got a buff. Personally, I'm not a fan of the bullet velocity on the big map on Caldera. But if that's not a problem for you, rock it. You're going to be very accurate with it. The recoil on this thing is pretty much non-existent. We got MX Silencer, Cooper, the 3.6, Cooper 45W, hard scope because of the nerf to tight grip. But tight grip is still pretty good on this thing. Fully loaded with hatch grip. Like I said, a lot of them have been changed to that. Polymer got that nerf. 60 round drum lengthen, and then the hand stop on this side. You could, if you also play Fortune's Keep, compressed rams is still pretty good. You'll lose a little bit of accuracy, but the fire rate increases, which will give you faster TTK. Either way, the buff really puts this thing in a really good spot. Damage per mag kind of sucks still because it's kind of like an M13 where you should have an 80 round mag for something like this, or even a 75 like the Automaton, but it just doesn't. And it is what it is, and it's great for what it is. Then we have the Type 100, which has always been kind of a melt machine, but always struggles with the damage per mag. We got recoil booster, rapid slate reflector, folding or grip folding with sleight of hand for the faster reload, quick tape grip, 36 round mag, subsonic, and then skeletal, because like I said, that's kind of where the meta is going with the Vanguard SMG. Then we got this new UMG, which is broken in 2 different ways. The fully auto version, a little bit harder to use, a little bit more visual shake. But if you have the build like this, you're going to have it relatively easy to use, super fast fire rate. It will delete people, but it has the drawbacks of an LMG. Slow reload, slow mobility, generally slow, aim down sight, and along those things. So we're gonna have 2 builds of this one. The full auto version, which I think is a lot of fun, feels a little bit more like an M13 where it just boom, and it will delete people, but it's an LMG, right? So we got MX silencer, this Bernard barrel, which is the top one here, and then we got the 3-6X, this Mercer WT, it's just the top one for recoil control. Movement speed will suck with it. We got tight grip on hand hatched with the 125 round box, which gives you the fastest fire rate. You can go with the 75, which has a very comparable one, and you know, that'll be good enough to get a couple downs, or you can go with the faster reload, which isn't significantly faster. So I think overall the 125 round is probably the way to go. You could also go with surveil, but I think tight grip is a little bit more necessary, or even brace for this gun in full auto. I think when you go the other route with the burst, it doesn't have any recoil, so you don't have to worry about that. But you can kind of go with what there. We got stripe angled and hatch, or kind of the quote-unquote meta attachments now for that with lengthen. And then we're using the Arma, which got a slight buff. Again, I haven't spent as much time with that because obviously the meta chasers, we're going to be using mainly the Blixen and the Marco that just recently got added. And I was never a fan of the Arma, but maybe I'll give it a chance again. We got recoil booster, the precision barrel, slate reflector, the Amarito folding with hard scoped, quick, taped with the skeletal 60 round and the subsonic. So pretty straightforward build. Again, I need a little bit more playtime with it, and that gets us in these top 2 builds, which is the Burst UMG. This thing is kind of broken, and I expect it will get a nerf at some point, but I think they're going to let it live a little bit just because not enough people are using it. This is like a 0.6% of loadouts include this gun, probably because it's 31 in the battle pass, and you got to level it up to use the burst and all that type of stuff. So good weapon. You don't really need to focus too much on the recoil is super easy to use. And you use it in this third one here, which is burst, and you can actually just hold the trigger and it'll just go brr, 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 and it'll just keep doing that burst. With 3-6X, we use this other one for the initial recoil. I feel that helps a little bit. Surveil on hand hatched with the stripe angled 125 round and then lengthen. So we're all set up there, and surveil is kind of a weird one that does actually help with bullet velocity. But if you're on a smaller map, you could probably get away with brace because it's going to help with those burst, which just does non-existent anyway, but it'll help. Then we got the Marco, which I think actually has some pretty clean iron sights. That's why I'm missing an attachment here. But we got recoil booster, the Amarito, no optic or slate reflector, the Amarito FR, momentum, quick, taped, skeletal with the Nambu 64 and hollow point. And you could use subsonic as well. It's kind of a matter of preference. Subsonic is generally good to keep you off the minimap if you like to avoid. It depends on how many people you're engaging, if you're an aggressive player or not. You can close that distance and be good to go. And then we got the meta chasers, which we know the NZ is broken right now. It should have got nerfed. Even though they nerfed it, they ended up buffing it because they fixed the barrel that was broken, and it made it even more broken and easy to use, and it's just boring. But it is what it is. MX silencer, orb weaver, 2.5 or 3-6X with the orb weaver E-Pack. Brace fully loaded hatch, 50 round lengthen and stripe angled. And that brings us to the Blixen, and we've covered the Blixen multiple different ways. And I think there are a lot of good builds, especially after the changes. I think you go recoil booster. This RMK is good, but this one will allow you to be way more accurate, and it always has been. Then we got slate reflector, remove stock. If you want even more accuracy, you can get rid of the remove stock and put on an actual stock that helps with that, which will more than likely be the skeletal stock. And then we got fleet, quick, tape, skeletal because of the movement, 54 Gorenko, which is kind of a standard build, and you're good there. And then we got the hollow point or subsonic, and then you're good to go on that route. But we already covered why hollow point is so good with this combination. That's the class setups. Appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.